So not being a deep technologist, I'm going to go back to my previous definition briefly. We tend to look at something that is a digital currency as something that involves a medium of exchange and a unit of account for a particular blockchain implementation. You can build applications on top of a wide variety of different blockchains that have utility for a specific use case. And it can be, let's use the token offerings as a particular example. You can be creating a token offering to monetize houses, to tokenize the transfer of deed and title, to sell, tokenized bread, whatever it may be. And so again, I think there's a lot of overlap in this conversation about currency. It's a bit of a misnomer to call them currency broadly. I think they're really powerful mediums of exchange. But again, it goes to that delineation between the two. And utility value is a difficult conversation, because we're striking at the core of valuation for some of these offerings. And there's some really interesting work out there now. And Chris Berniske, for example, and Jack Tatar published a book called The Innovative Investor. There's several other, a bunch of other research around how do you calculate utility value? How do you calculate velocity of tokens being used across a particular network to derive value and to derive a price for a particular token? So that's how we look at that different perspective.
By the way, I don't know if everyone knows what a smart contract is, but maybe...
Is it smart?
Not really. No, it's not very smart. But maybe can just briefly touch on that and then talk about how there's an interplay with the token sales. So this is a very non-technical description, don't worry. If you think of an example that frequently is given is a vending machine. All right, if you put money into the vending machine and you push the button, assuming that the vending machine is working properly, you'll get your bag of chips as soon as you put in your money and push the button. You don't need a human to take the money and give you the chips and make sure it happened. It happens automatically with if-then logic. A little bit different because you get to push a button, but the idea with the smart contracts is non-technical way of describing it is it overlays the blockchain and it uses if-then logic to cause something to happen upon the happening of something else. So sometimes there are also things called data oracles, where if you have to pull information into the smart contract that is available in the real world, like what is the price of gold today or something like that, what is the price of a share of stock, and if that would cause something to happen in your contract, you could pull that in. But the way this is often used, or the way it is used, frankly, in many token sales, is that's how you get the money in for the token sale. So someone will pay for it using a smart contract. So you may give some of your Ether or some of your Bitcoin to purchase these altcoins in a token sale. And just stepping back, someone earlier had mentioned the DAO and how 50 million of virtual currency was taken from it, right? It was because of a smart contract vulnerability. It was because of a vulnerability in the code. So,
Jeff, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think it's helpful. So, I think folks are hearing some of the terminology in this space, and it can be a little bit confusing. Sometimes you need to hear it a few times, but just to kind of maybe clarify some of the specific terminology that's used, because often this terminology is an analogy, and we have to remember that the analogy doesn't mean it's the thing it's an analogy to. So let's start with the term cryptocurrency. We describe them as cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ether. There's a number of these that are described as having properties that are similar to currencies we're familiar with, like, the dollar, the pound sterling, Swiss franc. But these are not, at least in the United States, these are not legally currencies. The definition of a currency, as defined by the IRS, as defined by the Treasury, that the CFTC relied on when we made the determination that Bitcoin could be a commodity. A currency is something in the United States, the legal definition, it has to be issued by a sovereign entity. It can be the US, it can be Switzerland, it can be the UK, it can be Europe. So cryptocurrencies are not currencies in the US. They are not legal tender for payment of debts. So we refer to them as cryptocurrencies, but they're not currencies. Now, looking around the world, there are some countries that actually have passed legal determinations that you can use Bitcoin or certain other cryptocurrencies to perform as legal tender to discharge debts. But generally speaking, in the US, cryptocurrencies are not currencies. To give one other example, we talk about exchanges for cryptocurrencies or for these digital tokens. These are places where you can go where people, open up accounts and they can buy or sell them. And you think it's like a brokerage account, that you're operating like you're trading stocks or bonds or something that's traded. But the things that people call exchanges are not exchanges in the eyes of regulators. In the eyes of the CFTC or the SEC, an exchange is regulated, has a legal status as a regulated trading market. It has a rule book. It performs market surveillance against fraud and manipulation. It has a self-regulatory authority to sanction people who transgress those requirements. Now, some of the, quote, exchanges in the U.S. Do have a regulatory status because they're regulated under state money transmitter laws, which generally the requirements have to do with protection of retail customers and anti-money laundering and know your customer requirements. But people will say, oh, I went and traded this on an exchange, and they think they have the same protections that they would have if they went and traded it on the CME or the New York Stock Exchange. But that's not actually the case. It's an analogy, and we need to remember as we look in this space that analogies are not the same thing as the thing you're making the analogy to.